Garrett. When I was young, I would always reorder the letters trying to make something new. Rat, gate, rag. But mostly I would come up with words like turrog, ragget, agret, and would find myself staring at the same incomprehensible and meaningless pile of words that I began with. At night, after my parents had gone to bed, I would spend hours staring into a mirror repeating my name. Garrett, 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 Garrett. Trying to put a square peg in a circular hole. I think I preferred myself a Justin then, but I wasn't quite sure what that meant either. However, as I grew older, the name was seared into my mind with the sheer weight of repetition, and it no longer puzzled me in the same fantastic way. I felt the same way when it came to love. Love. In high school, I used to make drawings of love, but they never seemed to quite capture all of it. The first time I read about love, it was in catechisms when I was in kindergarten. We read a psalm that said, "For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whomsoever believes in him shall not perish, but have everlasting life." John 3:16. Being in kindergarten, I never grasped the weight of this. I don't think I ever found much comfort in it, though. It scared me to think that a father could ever throw away his son. My senior year of high school, we had to write love poems for our English class. If we shared them in front of everyone, we got extra credit. And so, in front of a class, I read, "The Things You Left Behind." You will never know this, but on that bright spring day when you left, you took with you so many little things. The pungent smell of your Grecian hair dye and sweaty workout room. The little daggers of your insecurities were so pungent I can still feel the sting in my nose. Your black hairs that littered the bathtub and extended their tarantula-like limbs from the drain into the tiniest crevices, hiding like the monsters under my bed, which never seemed to bother you. The bitter coffee you would take such pride in burning until it was as black as some cliché thing like your heart, or maybe the freshly dyed hairs you strutted with such pride. The coffee with such a plump, heavy odor that it would fall flat on my tongue, too fat to waft itself across my nose. The tight, firm handshake that only real men give, the type of handshake that was meant to make up for everything by simply squeezing together my phalanges. Given by the type of men who go hunting and go fishing and watch sports. The type of men who have no time for tenderness. Your voice that barked orders and shouts, but more importantly, the voice that when I was young would speak so tenderly about the world, ringing with amusement. The voice that would spin tales of adventure and hunting into the blanket that held my tiny body as I gazed on, mouth agape, captivated in the wonder that only a small boy has for the world. And that spring day still glistens in my eyes, as the sun rays beam down, parting the clouds with God's visceral glory on a man who left. The rose garden's ripe, palpable smell that fluttered through the world and kissed my nose whenever a warm, gentle breeze would wrap itself around me, wiping away the salty water that would drip from my eye on the occasion that I was overwhelmed by such a beautiful day. Oh, the things you left behind. When I was finally done reading it, tears were streaming down my face, and it was one of the first times I ever felt naked. I remember all those eyes staring at the gaping hole in my heart. I wrote that after my father left my mother and I, and it was all around that same time that I started wondering what it meant to love someone. My dad used to say it to me all the time, and then one day it stopped. When I think of love now, I remember when I had just left for college, and my mom called me crying. She wanted to quit her job. It was too hard on her back, and she was tired and upset with where she ended up in life. At the end of the conversation, she said something that made me cry too. You know, Garrett, I don't think any of this would be worth it without you. Love in that moment was a burden for her to bear, and it showed in her tired eyes, her thinning hair, and her coarse working hands. Love was sacrifice. I felt it most not in her hugs, but in her sobs. Love was suffering, and I felt her pain as succinctly as I felt her love. You see, love was the demons that kept me up at night, painting vivid fantasies of my dad coming home and telling me that everything was okay and that he was there to stay. It was supposed to be something we shared. I wanted it to be a river flowing from one heart to another, but you dammed it up. And my love so welled up inside me that it stagnated and began to rot me from my core. Love was the knife that used to paint my thighs with a crimson-colored comfort. The same love that eventually compelled my mother to put me in therapy. So wild and loose in my body and my spirit that sometimes I found myself drowning in that overwhelming lake you created. Love was a burden you gave me. It was a house you built and then took away. At the time, I didn't know what to do with my newly homeless love, and on one particular day, I almost let it evict my soul from my body. But that's not how this story ends. That's not something you get to take away from me. I learned that love isn't always painful, and I learned it through seeds. I learned that when I gave my love and time to the barren dirt, it sometimes gave me flowers. This was how I learned to love myself, not with strides, but with baby steps. I planted the seeds, which eventually blossomed into something beautiful.